My parents demanded money from me for my stepbrother who beat me in the courtroom. I'm not sure where to start because my story is long and painful, but I really need to get it off my chest. I'm 28 now, and I've been through a lot. This is the first time I'm sharing my story publicly, and I hope it helps someone out there feel less alone. Growing up, I always felt like an outsider, even within my own family. My parents, Linda and Robert, were not the loving, supportive figures you'd hoped for. Instead, they were the source of most of my pain and suffering from as early as I can remember. They were abusive, both physically and emotionally. I was the eldest of three children with two younger brothers, Jake and Tommy. My parents treated my brothers relatively better, but for some reason I was always the target of their anger and frustration. My earliest memories are filled with fear. My parents had a twisted way of disciplining me, which involved a lot of yelling, name-calling, and physical punishment. I remember one incident when I was about 5 years old. I had accidentally spilled some milk while trying to pour myself a glass. My father exploded in rage, grabbing me by the arm and dragging me to the living room. He threw me onto the couch and started yelling about how useless and clumsy I was. My mother stood by her, arms crossed, nodding in agreement. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a regular occurrence in our household. School wasn't any better. From kindergarten through high school, I was bullied relentlessly. Kids at school picked up on the fact that I was different, that I didn't have the same confidence or happiness as other children. They teased me for my clothes, which were often old and worn out because my parents refused to buy me new ones. They called me names, pulled my hair, and excluded me from their games. I tried to tell my teachers, but they either didn't believe me or didn't care enough to intervene in middle school. Things escalated. One of the worst incidents happened when I was in 7th grade. A group of girls cornered me in the bathroom and started taunting me about my appearance. They pushed me around, pulled up my hair, and called me every name under the sun. When I tried to fight back, one of them grabbed my backpack and dumped all my books and papers into the toilet. They laughed and left me there crying and humiliated. I was too scared to tell anyone because I knew it would only make things worse. High school was a continuation of the same nightmare. The bullying got more sophisticated and insidious. It wasn't just physical anymore, it was psychological. My classmates spread rumors about me, wrote nasty things about me on social media, and made sure I knew I was unwanted. I remember one time when someone slipped a note into my locker that said, "Why don't you just kill yourself? No one would miss you." I carried that note around for weeks, contemplating its words. I felt completely alone and isolated. My home life during high school was just as hellish. My parents' abuse had not lessened. If anything, it had gotten worse. They constantly belittled me, telling me I would never amount to anything. My father had a drinking problem, and his rages were unpredictable and terrifying. One night, he came home drunk and started yelling at me for not having dinner ready. When I tried to explain that I had been at school all day and hadn't had time to cook, he slapped me across the face so hard that I saw stars. My mother, as usual, did nothing to stop him. Instead, she berated me for making him angry. Despite everything, I somehow managed to get into a decent university. I thought that maybe finally I could escape my past and start fresh. But the damage was already done. I was a shell of a person with no self-esteem and no idea how to function in a healthy environment. University was a struggle from day one. I found it hard to make friends and trust people. I was always on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. In my second year, I had a roommate named Sarah, who seemed nice enough at first. But soon, her true colors showed. She started making snide comments about my appearance and my habits. She would invite her friends over, and they would have loud late-night parties knowing I had early classes. When I confronted her about it, she laughed in my face and told me to lighten up. Things came to a head one night when I came back to our dorm to find that she had locked me out. I had to sleep in the common room, and the next day, she acted like nothing had happened. University wasn't all bad, though. I did have a few professors who genuinely cared and tried to help me. One of them, Professor Adams, noticed that I was struggling and offered me extra tutoring sessions. He was kind and patient, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone believed in me. I managed to scrape through my classes and eventually graduated, but the scars from my childhood and adolescence were still there. After university, I moved to a new city, hoping for a fresh start. I got a job in marketing and tried to build a new life for myself. But the trauma of my past continued to haunt me. I had trouble forming healthy relationships and often found myself in toxic situations. My self-esteem was still rock bottom, and I struggled with depression and anxiety. I started seeing a therapist who helped me unpack some of the pain and begin the long process of healing. One of the hardest things I had to do was confront my parents about their abuse. It took me years to work up the courage, but I finally did it. I wrote them a long letter detailing everything they had put me through and how it had affected me. I didn't expect an apology, and I didn't get one. My mother wrote back, accusing me of being overdramatic and ungrateful. My father didn't respond at all, but writing that letter was cathartic for me. It was a way to take back some of the power they had stolen from me. Today, I'm still working on healing. I have good days and bad days. I've cut off contact with my parents, which was one of the best decisions I ever made. I've built a small but supportive circle of friends who know my story and stand by me. I'm learning to trust people again and to believe that I deserve happiness. It's a long road, but I'm getting there one step at a time. When I first started seeing a therapist, Dr. Smith, I was a mess. I remember my first session like it was yesterday. I was so nervous. My hands were shaking and I could barely look her in the eye. Dr. Smith was kind and patient, creating a safe space where I could open up without fear of judgment. It took several sessions before I could even talk about my childhood. I would sit there staring at the floor while she gently encouraged me to speak. One of the most pivotal moments in my therapy was when Dr. Smith introduced me to the concept of self-compassion. She asked me to think about how I would treat a friend who had gone through similar experiences. Would I blame them? Call them weak or unworthy? Of course not. I would offer them kindness and understanding. She told me I needed to learn to treat myself the same way. It was a foreign concept to me, but it planted a seed that would eventually grow into a new way of thinking about myself. We worked through a lot of my past trauma using various techniques, including cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing EMDR. EMDR was particularly challenging because it forced me to relive some of my most painful memories, but it was also incredibly effective. I started to notice changes in myself, small at first, but significant. I felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful. In parallel with my therapy, I was trying to build my career in marketing. My first job out of university was at a small marketing firm. I was eager to prove myself, but my lack of self-confidence often held me back. I remember one incident during my first few months there. I had worked hard on a campaign proposal for a new client, and I was excited to present it to my team. During the meeting, my boss, Mr. Thompson, interrupted me several times, questioning my ideas and making me feel small. I left the meeting feeling crushed and doubting my abilities. Dr. Smith helped me unpack that experience. She made me realize that Mr. Thompson's behavior said more about him than it did about me. He was known for being a tough critic and often used his position to belittle others with her support. I started to find my voice. The next time I presented an idea, I was more assertive. I made sure to back up my proposals with solid data and stood my ground when challenged. University wasn't all bad, though. I did have a few professors who genuinely cared and tried to help me. One of them, Professor Adams, noticed that I was struggling and offered me extra tutoring sessions. He was kind and patient, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone believed in me. I managed to scrape through my classes and eventually graduated, but the scars from my childhood and adolescence were still there. After university, I moved to a new city, hoping for a fresh start. I got a job in marketing and tried to build a new life for myself. But the trauma of my past continued to haunt me. I had trouble forming healthy relationships and often found myself in toxic situations. My self-esteem was a huge win for me and marked a turning point in my career. I started to believe in myself and my abilities. I realized that I was capable of much more than I had ever given myself credit for. Outside of work, I continued to make strides in my personal life. Dr. Smith encouraged me to explore hobbies and interests that brought me joy. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was a child. I joined a local art class and found it incredibly therapeutic. It was a way to express myself without words, to channel my emotions into something beautiful. I also began to build a support network. I joined a few online communities for survivors of abuse and found solace in connecting with others who had been through similar experiences. We shared our stories, offered each other support, and celebrated our victories no matter how small. These connections were invaluable in my healing journey. At work, I faced another challenge that tested my resilience. We had a new hire, Lisa, who quickly became a favorite of Mr. Thompson. She was smart, confident, and seemed to excel at everything she did. I found myself feeling threatened and insecure, worried that I would be overshadowed. It brought back a lot of the old feelings of inadequacy and fear of not being good enough. Dr. Smith helped me navigate these feelings. She reminded me that Lisa's success didn't diminish my own. We talked about the importance of collaboration over competition and how supporting each other could lead to better outcomes for everyone. I decided to reach out to Lisa and offer my help with one of her projects. To my surprise, she was grateful and welcomed my input. We ended up working really well together, and I learned a lot from her. It was a lesson in the power of teamwork and the importance of lifting each other up. As my career progressed, I started to take on leadership roles. I was promoted to project manager and was responsible for overseeing a team. This was a huge step for me, and I was determined to be the kind of leader who supported and encouraged her team rather than tearing them down. I held regular team meetings where everyone had a chance to share their ideas and feedback. I made it a point to recognize and celebrate my team's achievements no matter how small. It was incredibly rewarding to see them grow and succeed. One particularly memorable project was a national ad campaign for a new product launch. It was a massive undertaking with a tight deadline and high expectations. I knew it would be a challenge, but I was excited to prove myself. I assembled a talented team and worked closely with them to develop a creative and effective campaign. There were countless late nights and moments of doubt, but we pulled together and made it happen. The campaign was a huge success. The product launch exceeded all expectations, and our client was thrilled. We received industry recognition and awards, and it was one of the proudest moments of my career. It felt like validation for all the hard work and perseverance I'd put in over the years. It also reinforced the importance of believing in myself and my abilities throughout this journey. Dr. Smith was a constant source of support and guidance. She helped me understand that healing is not a linear process and that setbacks are a natural part of growth. There were times when I felt like I was back at square one, but she reminded me of how far I had come and encouraged me to keep going. One of the most powerful exercises we did in therapy was writing a letter to my younger self. Dr. Smith asked me to write to the little girl who had endured so much pain and tell her everything I wished she had known back then. It was an emotional and cathartic experience. I told her that she was strong, resilient, and deserving of love and happiness. I told her that the abuse she suffered was not her fault and that she would go on to achieve great things despite it all. Writing that letter helped me to see myself in a new light and to acknowledge the strength and courage it took to survive and thrive. Today, I'm in a much better place. I've learned to set boundaries and prioritize my well-being. I've continued to grow in my career and have even started mentoring others who are just starting out in the industry. It's incredibly fulfilling to be able to give back and help others navigate their own challenges. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. The road to healing is long and often difficult, but it's worth every step. I've learned that it's okay to ask for help, to lean on others, and to be kind to myself. I've also learned that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. Life had been steadily improving for me. I was making strides in my career, maintaining healthy boundaries with toxic people, and continuing my therapy. But just when I thought I had finally put the past behind me, I received a letter that shattered my sense of security. My parents were suing me. The grounds for the lawsuit were absurd. They claimed that I owed them money for the cost of raising me, and they were demanding a substantial amount of money to support Jacob, the stepbrother they had adopted. After I left, the lawsuit felt like an attack on the progress I had made and the independence I had fought so hard to achieve. I knew I had to fight back. The court date was set for a Monday morning. I walked into the courtroom feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. My parents were seated on the other side, looking as vindictive as ever. Jacob, the stepbrother I had never met, sat next to them with a smug expression on his face. My lawyer, Miss Grant, reassured me that we had a strong case, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The first day of the trial was grueling. My parents' lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Edwards, presented their case with an air of confidence. He argued that my parents had made significant financial sacrifices to raise me and that I owed them compensation. He painted a picture of them as loving, dedicated parents who had been unjustly abandoned. When it was our turn, Miss Grant methodically dismantled their arguments. She presented evidence of the abuse I had suffered, including records from my therapy sessions and testimonies from people who had witnessed their behavior. She argued that I had no legal or moral obligation to support my stepbrother, especially given the circumstances. Throughout the week, the courtroom became a battlefield. Each day brought new challenges and emotional turmoil. On Tuesday, my mother took the stand and put on an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried, claiming that she had always done her best for me and that she couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Her crocodile tears were infuriating, but I kept my composure. Wednesday was my father's turn. He was more aggressive, trying to intimidate me with his testimony. He accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, and at one point he even shouted at me from the stand. The judge had to intervene, warning him to control his temper. Despite his bluster, Miss Grant skillfully exposed the inconsistencies in his story. Thursday was perhaps the hardest day for me. Jacob took the stand. He was a teenager, maybe 16 or 17, and he looked at me with pure hatred. He claimed that he was being deprived of a proper education and opportunities because I refused to help. It was clear that my parents had poisoned his mind against me, and it hurt to see someone so young consumed by such anger. By Friday, I was emotionally drained. I took the stand, nervous but resolute. Miss Grant guided me through my testimony, helping me explain the years of abuse and manipulation I had endured. I spoke about my struggles and the steps I had taken to rebuild my life. I could see the jury members listening intently, some of them clearly moved by my story. The weekend was a blur of anxiety and preparation for the final day of the trial. I knew that Monday would be crucial. Miss Grant and I went over every detail, ensuring that we were ready for whatever Mr. Edwards might throw at us. Monday arrived and the courtroom was tense. Mr. Edwards delivered his closing arguments, trying once again to paint my parents as victims. Miss Grant followed with a powerful speech, reminding the jury of the abuse I had suffered and arguing that I owed my parents nothing. After what felt like an eternity, the jury retired to deliberate. The hours dragged on, each minute filled with unbearable tension. Finally, they returned with their verdict. I had won. The relief was overwhelming. I had stood up to my parents and won. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as the judge announced the decision. But just as I began to relax, chaos erupted. Jacob, who had been seething throughout the trial, suddenly leapt to his feet. He grabbed a baseball bat from his bag and charged at me. The courtroom exploded into shouts and screams. I barely had time to react as he swung the bat at me. I managed to dodge, but the bat grazed my arm, sending a sharp pain through me. Security guards tackled Jacob to the ground, restraining him as he thrashed and yelled. The courtroom was in disarray, with people shouting and trying to process what had just happened. I was rushed out of the courtroom by Miss Grant and a couple of guards, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside the courtroom, I took a moment to catch my breath. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins and my arm throbbed where the bat had struck. Miss Grant called an ambulance and I was taken to the hospital to get checked out. Fortunately, the injury wasn't severe, but the whole experience left me shaken. The incident with Jacob added another layer of complexity to the situation. My parents tried to use it as leverage, claiming that I had provoked him and that he was just a child acting out. However, the security footage from the courtroom clearly showed him initiating the attack. Jacob was taken into custody, and my parents' attempt to spin the narrative in their favor fell flat. In the days that followed, the story gained media attention. Reporters hounded me, wanting to know more about the trial and the attack. I declined all interviews, choosing to focus on my recovery and moving forward. Miss Grant helped me file a restraining order against my parents and Jacob, ensuring that they couldn't come near me again. Despite the trauma of the attack, I felt a sense of closure. The trial had forced me to confront my past head-on, and I had emerged victorious. I continued to see Dr. Smith, who helped me process the events and deal with the lingering fear and anxiety. She reminded me that I had taken control of my life and that I was no longer a victim. As time went on, I found new strength in my experiences. I became an advocate for others who had suffered from abuse. Sharing my story in support groups and online forums, my career continued to thrive, and I found fulfillment in helping others navigate their own journeys of healing. One particularly memorable event occurred a few months after the trial. I was invited to speak at a conference on overcoming adversity. Standing on that stage, sharing my story with a room full of people, I felt a profound sense of empowerment. I realized that my past didn't define me. It was my strength and resilience that truly defined who I was. Life isn't perfect, and I still have my struggles. But I know now that I am capable of overcoming anything that comes my way. My journey has made me stronger, and I am determined to use my experiences to help others find their own strength. Following the attack in the courtroom, Jacob was taken into custody and faced charges for assault. The evidence against him was undeniable, with the security footage clearly showing him attacking me with a baseball bat. His trial was swift, and he was found guilty. Given his age and the violent nature of the attack, he was sentenced to juvenile detention. The judge also mandated therapy for him, recognizing that deeply rooted issues likely instilled by my parents. The consequences of Jacob's actions rippled through our family. Child Protective Services (CPS) got involved, conducting a thorough investigation into my parents' fitness as guardians. The abuse I had endured, coupled with their failure to provide a safe and supportive environment for Jacob, painted a grim picture. CPS determined that my parents were unfit to care for any children and stripped them of their parental rights. Jacob was placed in a rehabilitation program within the juvenile detention system, and any other foster children they might have been caring for were removed from their custody. This drastic turn of events left me with mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt vindicated knowing that my parents were finally being held accountable for their actions. On the other hand, it was heartbreaking to see how deeply their toxic behavior had affected Jacob. Despite everything, he was still just a kid, and part of me hoped he could find a way to heal and build a better future. Amidst the turmoil, I found solace in my work and therapy. My therapist, Dr. Smith, continued to be a guiding light, helping me process the aftermath of the trial and the attack. She encouraged me to focus on the positive changes in my life and to continue building a future that wasn't defined by my past. During this time, I also started to open myself up to the possibility of new relationships. I had spent so long being guarded and wary of others, but I realized that part of healing meant allowing myself to connect with people again. That's when I met Sarah. Sarah and I met through mutual friends at a dinner party. She was warm, funny, and incredibly kind. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of art and travel. For the first time in a long time, I felt a genuine connection with someone. Our friendship quickly blossomed into something more, and we started dating. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. I was open with Sarah about my past, and she was incredibly supportive. But I still had moments of doubt and fear. Trust didn't come easily to me, and there were times when my insecurities got the better of me. But Sarah was patient and understanding, always willing to talk things through and reassure me. One memorable incident occurred about 6 months into our relationship. We had planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be a relaxing escape from the stress of our everyday lives. However, on the first night, I had a nightmare about the attack in the courtroom. I woke up in a panic, and Sarah was there to comfort me. She held me as I cried, telling me that I was safe and that she was there for me. That moment solidified my feelings for her. I realized that she wasn't just a partner, she was someone who truly cared about my well-being and was willing to stand by me through thick and thin. As our relationship grew stronger, I started to envision a future with Sarah. We talked about our dreams and goals, and it became clear that we were on the same page. About a year into our relationship, I decided to take the next step. I planned a special evening recreating our first date and ending with a proposal, to my delight. Sarah said yes. Our engagement was a joyous time filled with planning and excitement for the future. We decided to have a small, intimate wedding with our closest friends and family. The day of the wedding was perfect. We exchanged vows in a beautiful garden, surrounded by blooming flowers and the people we loved. As I stood there, holding Sarah's hands and looking into her eyes, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I had never experienced before. The wedding was a celebration of love and resilience. My friends from the support group, colleagues from work, and a few of the supportive professors from university attended. Even Professor Adams, who had helped me so much during my studies, was there to celebrate with us. It was a testament to the fact that I had built a new family, one of choice and mutual respect. One particularly touching moment was during the reception when my friend Lisa gave a speech. Lisa had been through her own struggles, and we had bonded over our shared experiences. In her speech, she talked about how far I had come and how proud she was to see me standing strong and happy. Her words brought tears to my eyes and reminded me of the power of friendship and support. After the wedding, Sarah and I settled into our new life together. We bought a cozy apartment in the city, filled it with art and memories, and started building a future. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and continued to support each other's dreams. Sarah encouraged me to pursue my passion for art more seriously, and I started painting again. I even held a small exhibition at a local gallery, which was a huge milestone for me. Professionally, things were also going well. I received a promotion at work, becoming a senior project manager. This new role came with more responsibilities, but I was ready for the challenge. One of the most significant projects I led was a marketing campaign for a nonprofit organization focused on mental health awareness. It was a cause close to my heart, and I poured my soul into the project. The campaign was a success, raising awareness and funds for mental health services. It was incredibly fulfilling to see my work make a positive impact. As time passed, Sarah and I talked about starting a family. We decided to adopt, wanting to give a child the love and support that we both had been deprived of in our own ways. The adoption process was long and sometimes frustrating, but it was worth it. We were eventually matched with a beautiful little girl named Mia. Bringing Mia into our home was one of the happiest moments of our lives. She brought so much joy and light into our world. Parenthood was a new and exciting challenge. Sarah and I navigated sleepless nights, toddler tantrums, and the joys of watching Mia grow and discover the world. We were determined to create a loving and supportive environment for her, breaking the cycle of abuse and neglect that had marked our own childhoods. Maya's laughter and curiosity were constant reminders of the new life we had built. Through all these experiences, I continued to attend therapy. Dr. Smith remained a crucial part of my support system, helping me navigate the ups and downs of life. We worked on coping strategies for the anxiety that still lingered and discussed the challenges of balancing work, marriage, and parenthood. Her guidance was invaluable, and I knew that I wouldn't be where I was without her help. Reflecting on my journey, I realized how far I had come from a scared, abused child to a confident, successful adult with a loving family. My life had transformed in ways I never thought possible. The pain of my past had not disappeared, but it had become a part of my story, a story of resilience, healing, and hope.